Hey, gang, it's me, Dr. Steve. And as we count down to November, it's more crucial than ever for all of us to get out and get involved in civics, right? That means getting involved in politics at the local level, the state level, the national level. I've been saying that for months, for years, in fact. The future of our country literally hinges on our active participation in the political process, yours and mine. Meaningful change can restore the principles our nation was founded on, even if the mainstream media is trying to do everything they can to convince you otherwise. But that, of course, all begs the question: where should we invest our time and our gifts? How do we even begin? I mean, we each live full, busy lives, and adding another element to that just seems impossible a lot of the time. Now, thankfully, I've met some amazing people through this platform who, like you, have tons of family and career and other commitments, but are still making a huge difference in their corner of the world. And I brought one of them on today to encourage you as you get more involved. Elizabeth Landis is here. Elizabeth was part of our special live event a few weeks back. You may have seen her there. She's been actively involved in the civics realm since 2016, when a local issue drew her into the importance of being educated on how the systems of government work. Her new book, The Forgotten Realm, has just come out. You can get it at civilrealm.com. There's a link below. And it's a deep dive into how we can all become more effectively engaged with the civil realm and bring some much needed healing to our nation. So, Elizabeth, welcome back. Great to see you again.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
No, it was an honor having you at our live event a few weeks back. And for those who missed it, I was wondering if you could just kind of share a little bit of your backstory, just really briefly, if you could just give an overview of how you got involved in civics and also why it's so important for all of us to get involved in some way.
Sure. I'll share something that I think a lot of the listeners of you can relate to, but going to vote and driving home from that thinking, I really don't know who I voted for or what that position really does. But
Right.
I'm a homeschool mom. I would drive home and all the things to do at home, I would get back to it. But I call that voter guilt. And
Mm.
so my book helps address voter guilt so that a reader would understand all of the offices on the ballot and all of the special little things on the ballot that we also have to vote for
Wow.
initiatives
Yeah.
or referendums. But what really threw me into doing something about that was when my husband said, we ought to subscribe to the local newspaper. Our kids show up in it for 4-H events, library events, theater events, and people would give us articles. He said, we really ought to just subscribe. And we started to do that. And not long after we did, we saw that there was a local energy issue in our
Mhm.
county, and 126 people had signed leases with an energy company. And so I also saw that there would be an informational outreach at a local church. I went to that. It was standing room only, and I knew one person in the room.
Mm.
I took feverish notes, and I realized that I had a lot of learning to do. And then there was a public outreach. So I had done some research on the issue, and we were encouraged by those in leadership to present articles. And so it was our local library has a wonderful auditorium, and my husband presented there that night. I did as well. Afterwards, we were kind of separated by the crowd. He met a nice looking older gentleman who shook his hand and said, nice job tonight. And my husband said, well, who are you? May I ask? And he said, oh, I'm your local county commissioner. Same thing happened to me a few minutes later. I hadn't been able to get in touch with my husband. We both made the same faux pas. And it was at that moment that we both realized we were at a foot of a huge learning curve in civil government. We don't know what's in the civil realm, I should say, and we don't know what's going on. So that was the beginning. That was 8 years ago. I was an activist then, and that was my entry point. Um, I don't know how far you want me to go, if that's good
Yeah.
enough,
Well,
but
I'm curious actually. What are some of the challenges that you faced? Obviously, it wasn't just you weren't just sitting back taking notes and soaking it all in. You must have had some challenges. that made this at least a bit of a formidable feat.
Yes, you're right. It wasn't a picnic in the park. It was a jolt. And uh, I would say what I needed at that time, the biggest challenge was realizing this learning curve, that I had an issue at hand. But so I had to learn about the issue, but I also had to learn the whole structure of who I was addressing at what part of the government. And what I needed was courage. And so the name of your group, Courageous Conservatives, that courage is so needed, because when
Mm.
you realize you don't know much, the first thing to do is think, oh, you know,
Right,
I feel so inadequate.
right, right.
And stepping into these places and stepping into having to meet with people who are in office, it just takes a lot of courage. And I
Yeah.
would encourage your listeners, take heart. You're not alone, and this is a challenge we have to face head on. We have to overcome our fear of the unknown.
How did you overcome that fear?
Well, I prayed. And I thought, in the Bible, who dealt with this kind of situation? Well, Daniel dealt with it. He
Mm-hmm.
was
Yeah.
whisked away as a young man, and I found a passage that he had written, and I actually had to share it when I was meeting with a local county commissioner. And that's how I dealt with it. Is I started scheduling meetings with our local elected officials. But I also started attending the public meetings. And so what I learned from Daniel reading in Daniel 2, and you should look this up, but blessed be the name of God forever and ever, for wisdom and might are his. They're not
Mm.
mine, they're his. He changes the times and the seasons. He removes kings and raises up kings. And I interpret kings as being, in this case, county commissioners.
Yeah.
Uh,
Right.
he reveals deep and secret things. He knows what's in the darkness, and light dwells with him. So
Mm.
even though we feel like we're in the darkness,
Yeah.
even though it's such a challenge, he knows what's going on, and light dwells with him. So that was my consolation. And that's where I direct people right there. He was in a foreign country. He had it so much harder than we do. We're in our own nation. We have our own constitution. We have the power of the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
We just need to figure out our American system.
Right. 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 It's so amazing the way you're talking there because we were talking before we went live here, and I was telling you about my trips to the Mediterranean and Rome and all this sort of stuff. And when I took the tour, particularly of Rome, but just anywhere in Europe, Barcelona, the Sagrada Familia, what I found so fascinating, the key theme, it just struck me so powerfully. The key theme, it seemed, I kept encountering in the Christian art everywhere I saw it is this transformative significance of pain and darkness and fear and sorrow and suffering, where every great piece of art would shine forth, for example, say Christ in this position of suffering. But if you have eyes to see, you see him victorious over the suffering. You see him dying, but if you've got the eyes to see, the deeper eyes, you see him rising. You see him conquering death. So it seems it seems like exactly what you're talking about in terms of this Daniel references. There is this Christians have a unique way of seeing the dangers and the darkness and seeing through it and finding paradise in the midst. And that makes us very dangerous. If you start threatening us with death and we see life, we see resurrection, we become a very unruly people. We're not very easily intimidated or controlled. And it just seems to be when I look at the classical aesthetic frames of reference of Christianity, we really seem to have that at the forefront. We possibly have lost it over the last several decades, but then when I'm hearing you talk that way, I'm seeing that come back, that kind of courage, that transformative significance of even though I'm facing a giant, I see that giant on his back, flat on his back.
Mm-hmm. Hannah in the book of Samuel, after she gives up little Samuel, she says, uh, my heart rejoices in the Lord. I smile at my enemies because I rejoice in your salvation. And that's what we have that's so powerful. We can actually not get wound up in the face of our enemies, but we can smile at them. And who
That's
knows when they're going to come over to our side? We have to
that's
expect
right.
them. Many will.
Again, it's just exactly, you're just extending that whole transformative paradigm to it. Exactly. The Saul becomes Paul, right? It's denying Peter in Acts chapter 2 becomes the single greatest proclaimer of Christ imaginable. So yeah, no, I love it. It's just it's behold, I make all things new, basically. So what so well, let's come down from the mountain a little bit here. What I mean, what I love about your book is it's extremely practical. What's something simple that our listeners can do here to apply particularly our faith in the civil realm?
Well, when I think of our American system, especially as set out in the Constitution, it's reflected at every level. And so, in Christ we live and move and have our being. So why not start right where we are? So if you live in, if you're a listener and you live in the city, go find your city council, look it up on the internet and find out when it meets, and take some courage and go sit in and observe. Don't try to accomplish anything. You don't have to change anything right now. Just go observe. If you live outside of city limits, then go to what in most states is called your county courthouse, to your county meeting there. And if you live near your state house, then find out when it's in session and go observe either the Senate, which it's called Senate in all 50 states, or House Assembly, the equivalent of the House of Representatives for your state. Go and observe. You have two chambers there to observe. And so at any level, wherever you live, if you're in New England, you have town government, go observe and just take it in and pray for the people who are leading. You may not know any of them, like I didn't in the beginning. And pray for wisdom on what you should do, and hang out in the book of Proverbs, because the book of Proverbs will guide you in it'll give you all sorts of insight. I'll just give you one example. By long forbearance a ruler is persuaded, and a gentle word breaks a bone. So if you have somebody who's in office and you want to persuade them, give it time and give it kindness. But my book specifically, then it describes for you what you're seeing when you go observe. And it tells you who the power players are and where you go and find the rules of the game, which is going to be called the city code or the county code or the state statutes. State constitution. My book lays all that out and it weaves it all together so that you know the connection. So it gives you ideas on personal connections, and it gives you all sorts of information on the actual structure of the system. And then we don't get nearly so wound up on issues.
Right. Right, exactly. Especially when we understand how to be a part of that system and use it for good. Gang, it's called The Forgotten Realm. Just click on that link below or go to civilrealm.com. That's civilrealm.com to get your copy. Elizabeth, what do you hope? I mean, obviously, writing a book is a long process and so forth. You've written this wonderful book, The Forgotten Realm. What do you hope your book will be used by for those who are looking to step up and be a courageous conservative in their community? What do you hope? What did you envision with the book?
Well, my vision grew as I wrote it, because the more people I talked to, the more I realized everyone needs this book. But I didn't initially start out for everyone. I wrote it because it was the book I couldn't find. So I needed it. I laid down 5 years of my life writing it, and my hope, my prayer is that it reforms our nation. You see, I believe that we are still a Christian nation, but we've been silenced and we've been kind of shamed. And the liberal media and also those in office and the administrations that run our systems of governance, they've made us feel like we don't belong. And
Right.
one of the themes in my book is no, we're in the nation of we the people. And it's our government, and it's time for us to reinvest in it. And as you mentioned at the outset, we need to find time to do that. So we really have to re-examine our personal portfolios. We may have to give up a Bible study, a book club, choir. Uh, I personally don't go to fellowship groups because my fellowship group, strangely enough, is at Moscow City Council where I live. And I've made friends with a lady on the other side of the aisle, and I take her home each time, and we chat for probably an hour after City Council. So it's getting to know the people in our communities, getting to know how our community works, and getting to know how government works. And I say community, but that may even be at the state level, or for some of the listeners, this would even be in DC.
Right. Right. The national level as well. Yeah. That's it's so really, you're so inspiring. Gang, you've got to get this book. Elizabeth's such a great example of what being courageous and active in our political system looks like. I mean, through challenges, triumphs, and the like, her story is one that encourages and teaches people like you and me to do our part in restoring faith, family, and freedom to our wonderful nation. John Adams said our Constitution was made for religious people, and if religious people are not rising up, that Constitution is going to collapse. So get your hands on this amazing book. Again, civilrealm.com. The book itself is called The Forgotten Realm. You can get it at civilrealm.com, or just click on that link below. Sounds to me like it's going to be a major game changer in our lives, especially perfectly right before November, but beyond as well. Elizabeth, thank you so much for being with us. Great to chat with you again.
Thanks so much for having me.